Let's do it. Okay. My name is Andrea Jacobs, and this is Additional Dwelling Units in Your Community, Part 2 from Housing North. And I'm going to share this quickly. There we go. And Housing North is the real quickly, because you're probably all return viewers, and we've done this once before. No?
I'm
There we
back. Can you see me?
Yeah, we can see you, Nicole.
Okay. Just want me to do a share screen so you know I can, or?
We're going to keep moving forward with the
Okay.
beginning part and hope that we can identify any technical difficulties throughout. So Housing North is a regional nonprofit that's creating pathways and partnerships for houses in Northwest Michigan. We work with northwestern counties of Lower Michigan, and I am the Emmett County Housing Ready Program Director. The Housing Ready Program is meant to help the local communities and potential developers and local units of government sort of prepare themselves and identify places for residential development of all kinds, because we have obviously in this area a drastic need. So this is an idea of what we cover. These are some of our founding partners here: Fry Foundation, Networks Northwest, Rotary Charities. And that Housing Ready program, again, is it starts with like a checklist. So maybe community can take a look at, local units of government can take a look at that checklist and make themselves a little bit more familiar with some of the creative strategies and possibilities that reduce the barriers for residential development of all kinds. Some of those things are smaller lot sizes. Some of those things are smaller footprints for dwelling units. Some of that means zoning that allows for higher density where it's possible. In our rural area, infrastructure and sewer and water become sort of a big hurdle. And in communities where we have good access to infrastructure and can allow for a greater density, we need to take a look at what that feels like and what form that takes, because it isn't always apartment buildings. This is our familiar numbers to everybody up here, but in that 10 county region, a total demand is estimated for over 15,000 units. And as you can see here in the bottom corner, more than 10,000 of those units would need to be rentals. Now, a rental doesn't need to be an apartment. It can be a small home. It can be a large home. It can take a lot of different forms. And that's where the additional dwelling unit concept that's familiar with a lot of communities out west and throughout the nation has become more and more popular and more possible and less threatening overall, and has shown so much success for creating more viable communities, more easily sustained kind of neighborhoods. It allows for multi-generational family units and expansions. And these are all things that we're in Northern Michigan sort of coming to terms with, and really realizing that there's places to put these 10,000 units, and it doesn't always have to lead to sprawl. Because we up here very much value our green space and very much value, the design and the layout of our communities. And many of them are historical communities. And this kind of building with additional dwelling units in their variety of forms is very consistent with historical building practices. So I won't go too far into that, but having housing ready staff in place in each of the counties helps to lead community members, local units of government, also potential developers through the process that right now can be very cumbersome. And as we know, it's not simple and easy to get some of these projects moving forward. And we also need to create space for some of the smaller developers or the individual builders and people that want to make a difference in their community or want to build, you know, something in their neighborhood. It doesn't necessarily need to be a gigantic building company. So, you know, these are all really good opportunities to keep the economy and the developing neighborhoods and the developing residential dwelling units moving forward from all sides, large projects all the way down to very small and individual projects here. I will say Emmet County has done a ton of work, and I'm pleased to introduce Tammy Dernberg, who is our Emmet County Planning and Zoning Director. I just call her the Empress, and she has made lots and lots of progress in the past few years with the county commission, because Emmet County is largely guided by county zoning. The steps that she's been able to make are very important and impactful for our whole community, and have been again and again held up as an example of positive barrier reduction as far as meeting this housing crisis or the demand for housing units. So Tammy Dernberg, please share your screen and say hello to all of our friends.
Hello, everyone. Aria, you'll have to stop sharing your screen, I'm told, before
I'm going to right now.
But thank you for that introduction. It's a bit of a stretch to call me anything other than Planning and Zoning Director for Emmett County, but I appreciate that. So, you know, it's not one person for sure that can make this happen, this sort of thing happen. It takes the whole community, and it's not a quick process in any event. So accessory dwelling units is something that has been around for a very long time, as we all know. I'll give you a little background on myself. I am the Planning and Zoning Director for Emmett County. So Emmett County is located in the northwest corner of Michigan. It starts at the top of the state, the Lower Peninsula at the Mackinac Bridge, and then continues down to south of Petoskey and Bear Creek Township and Resort Township, heading toward the west toward Charlevoix County. I've been the zoning administrator here since about 1998, the end of the year then, as the assistant, and then became the planning and zoning director in 2011. So I've been here a long time, seen a lot of changes, but you know, I started to go back through our master plans as we were talking about housing this year, just to see what our first master plan showed. And it showed that housing has always been an issue and a concern for our county, affordable housing particularly, because we do have a lot of the lakeshore communities, as you can see here on our map. So those are higher end usually, not real attainable for our workforce necessarily. And so housing has always been something that we've been concerned with. Here we do have countywide zoning in Emmett County. So the townships that have the white and the purple and the green and dark green and yellow, those are townships that are under county zoning, where the ones with the hatch are under their own zoning jurisdiction, as well as the city of Petoskey, city of Harbor Springs, and then the village of Alanson, Powston, and Mackinac City. So we look at it from a holistic standpoint for the whole county, but we also have to be aware that we do have areas that are much more densely populated, like Bear Creek Township around the city of Petoskey. And then we have the more urban or rural areas that are much less densely populated, like Springville Township, and then farther to the north, where we have Center Township and Redmond Township. These are much more rural townships, much larger zoning lots in many cases. The purple that you see is state land. So those are large pockets of land that are likely not going to be developed. But in our more densely populated areas, we have a higher density than we would have in the outerlying areas of our county. Bit of history. So in 1972, zoning began here in Emmett County. We allowed single family dwellings only, except R2 zoning district, which is the multiple family district. And that seemed to work okay, but we still have the issue that we have, an issue with affordability for housing. And we were hearing over and over, zoning is a barrier to affordable housing. Zoning is a barrier to different types of housing. In 2015, I suggested to our planning commission that we allow for duplex units throughout our zoning districts. And they said, that we don't think that's a good idea to allow duplexes unless they're owner occupied. I also suggested accessory dwelling units at that time, and they said, absolutely not. We don't want to see things deteriorate as far as blight goes, and they just didn't think that it was a good idea in 2015. So what can we do when we're hearing over and over, zoning is a barrier, zoning is a barrier? I just kept hearing that at different housing seminars, at housing partnership meetings. And so we started to think, well, what can we do? What can we do to remove the zoning as a barrier, or at least reduce the barrier of zoning when people are presenting? So we listened to the housing partnership, which is made up of many citizens and groups like the Chamber of Commerce, the Realtors Association, citizens that are just interested in housing and concerned about our housing need. And they had put together presentations. They presented to our planning commission to show the need, and they provided data. That data came from Housing North. It came from local businesses and on the ground, true examples of housing crisis and need. So our planning commission did listen to them, and they adopted the Housing Ready resolution in January of 2020 that was provided by Housing North. But that, then we had COVID, and it created a situation where there was not much time on the planning commission's agenda for continuing planning, but we continued to forge ahead anyway. We had a citizen planner who took the MSU Extension Citizen Planner program. He wanted to become a master citizen planner. So he put together a great presentation to our planning commission and moved the bar, I would say, help them understand the need and some solutions that could be potential solutions for this. So reduced minimum house size was one thing that was presented by our citizen planner, and our planning commission did go ahead and do that. They felt that our current standards of 720 had been created when mobile homes were not as safe as they are today. And so probably back in the 70s. And so they reduced the minimum house size down to 560 square feet. They increased the density where we have sewer and water. They allowed for higher density than we ever had before. And then they also adopted a new section of our zoning ordinance called Plan Unit Development Residential Overlay. We were hearing that your densities just don't work out financially. So we created a section of our ordinance, a whole article that allows for the developer to come in and basically explain to the planning commission why they need the higher density and how it will work with the utilities, and basically plead their case to the planning commission in order to have higher density on parcels. And that's been used a couple of times, hopefully successfully. We have 2 that are supposed to be starting this year. And then permit accessory dwelling units. That was something that the citizen planner really drove home with our planning commission. We offered them data and resources. And I'm happy to say they adopted that ordinance in March of this year. So the data that was provided came from Networks Northwest, the target market analysis. It showed us that we needed about 2,288 housing units, a mixture of rentals and owner-occupied units throughout our whole county. And in order to get there, we felt like we needed to make some changes. And so what we did, I'm going to go forward here just a bit. We polled our planning commissioners and said, would you be receptive to several different things? And accessory dwelling units was one of those questions that we asked, and 80% of our planning commissioners that responded said, yes, we're interested in pursuing accessory dwelling units. So that kind of gave us the green light to move forward. We had probably 10 different questions that we posed to our planning commission, And some of them were 100%. We needed to do that, like look at parcels that could be rezoned to allow higher density and other things like that. Make sure that we have a map that shows our septic and our well locations versus sanitary, sewer, and water, so that people can know where higher density would be allowable. But also, we provided this data from Networks Northwest and Housing North. This is a slide directly from the Citizen Planner program that Travis Johnson from our staff put together to become a master citizen planner, showing data of our county specifically. Incidentally, these numbers 2020, the average sale price for Emmett County has increased dramatically since then. The March estimated or the March number of sales that we have from the Emmett Realtors Association shows that that number has increased by about $50,000. So we're upwards of $507,000 for the average price of a new home in Emmett County. And I can tell you that our average household income hasn't increased substantially enough to make up for that difference. So this was information provided to the Planning Commission so that they could make informed decisions on what they would like to see changed in our zoning ordinance to make sure that it aligned with our master plan, which really focused on allowing multiple different types of housing and removing the zoning barriers. Also, AARP puts out this great publication. There's two different publications that our Planning Commission received. This is one of them, available right on their website as a free download. It gives you some examples. We also looked at other communities and to see what they were doing with accessory dwelling units. And we modeled our ordinance on some of those different zoning ordinances that were already in place, but made it specific to our own county so that the Planning Commission and the Board of Commissioners were comfortable with that. So we defined accessory dwelling units, and that can be for any different township, city, or village that has their own zoning or county. They can define what accessory dwelling unit means to them. It could be detached, attached. It just varies from community to community how you want to define that accessory dwelling unit. And then in our situation, the R's, R1, R2, RR, SR, those are all residential districts. So they're permitted by right with a little asterisk, and that little asterisk takes them to anyone looking at our zoning ordinance to additional supplemental regulations. So they are allowed by right, but they have to meet a certain number of criteria in order for those to be approved. We also allowed it in our PT district, which is a small parking transition area between commercial and residential. And then farm and forest, which is when you saw that zoning map, the green, dark green, and the white, which is the majority of our county, is zoned this FF1 and FF2 with a minimum lot size of 1 acre in FF1 and 2 acres in FF2. So those are allowed by right, but with these additional standards. We eliminated the minimum floor area from accessory dwelling units, where permanent dwellings do have the minimum 560 or 720, depending on which zoning district they're in. And then the minimum building width. Right now in the residential zones, the minimum width is 20 feet for half of its length for dwellings. So it's essentially ruling out single wide mobile homes, but this standard eliminates that minimum building width. It goes on to provide an intent and purpose under the supplemental regulations. So this is meant to accommodate families and be kind of a transition possibly for homeownership at a future time, but to maintain the residential character of the neighborhood and the location in which it's placed. So we have 14 standards. I'm not going to go through every one of them, but essentially a property owner that wants to have an accessory dwelling unit has to sign off that they have read each of these. We have created a new zoning application. So when someone comes in and they suggest that they would like to have another dwelling on their property, if accessory dwelling unit is something that they would consider, they have to go through and read and initial each of these standards so that they realize and show that they've read that they understand that it's not just a dwelling unit that can be used for any purpose. It has to be, it has to meet these standards. So it identifies setbacks, it identifies size, and then it allows for certain things. It does prohibit short-term rentals. So this is something that we realize that can be controversial. We had a discussion about this at our planning commission. Some of our planning commissioners were supportive of short-term rentals for ADUs and others were not. At the end, they did keep this standard in there. They thought that this step of adding ADUs is a giant step for our county, but they wanted to take it in smaller steps, so they kept that standard in place. And if the state does change the standards at their level and allow for short-term rentals for all dwellings, then we'll have to reevaluate this standard. But at this point, that's allowable. And then number 10 is on the screen right now. So when I get to the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit about theory, policy, and practice. So number 10 says the use of a mobile home, camper trailer, recreational vehicle, and or other temporary dwelling or non-permanent structure shall be prohibited as an ADU. Mobile home in our zoning ordinance is also a manufactured home. They are one and the same in our definitions. And so in theory, it seemed like that was what we wanted to do. We wanted to allow for, and our master plan supports this, many different types of housing. In policy, so we adopted our zoning ordinance, we made the policy, created that, and it seemed all good. If we're ready to go, let's bring it on. And then in practice, well, our first request came in, and it was exactly the people, and then the reason that we proposed this in the first place, we definitely hit on, we have aging population and many that would like to age in place. It's better for our seniors to age in place and better for our community. So we had a family come in and they own the parcel of land that's on the right-hand side on the screen. They have a house and they have a detached garage. Next to them on the opposite side, on the west side, is a house and a garage owned by their sister and brother-in-law. And they wanted to be able to put a mobile home for an aging parent between the two so that they could care for her. It would be very close between the two siblings. And on the left-hand side is the little plot plan that they created and shared showing the mobile home. It would be set back a bit from where the house is located. It's a brand new mobile home. So it is something that would fit into the area. There's mobile homes on the opposite side of the road in the vicinity. So it fit the character of the neighborhood. However, number 10, as you'll recall, prohibited mobile homes. So we had to come up with a solution if we wanted to allow this. And at the same time, we had another individual who came into our office. He owns this piece of property. It's 2.5 acres. In order to split it off, he needed 4 acres. He has a house in a detached accessory building, and he wanted to put a mobile home for his granddaughter, an adult granddaughter, to live on, because as he said, she cannot afford to buy a house in Petoskey. And he has land and he'd like to allow her to build a mobile home on his property. Well, again, prohibited. So we quickly proposed that we remove the term mobile home so that it would be allowed to be used as an accessory dwelling unit, and sent notices to all of the townships. So with county zoning, we realized that townships could have their own zoning if they wish, but we reached out to all of the townships and asked for their input. Would they like to allow mobile homes as accessory dwelling units? And it was split. Some said, yes, we would like to see mobile homes. We realize that there's definitely a need. The individual on the parcel of land here had indicated that they couldn't find a builder for at least 2 years. The mother's rent had been increased by about $400 a month, which she was not able to stay in that location. So the Planning Commission, after 2 public hearings and 2 notices to each of the townships, did recommend approval on a split vote, and that went to the Board of Commissioners. And on Monday night, they approved unanimously allowing mobile homes as accessory dwelling units. Now, there is a provision also in the ordinance that says that the accessory dwelling unit has to fit into the neighborhood. So that'll be a judgment call, but certainly there are locations where a mobile home would fit into the community, and there are situations where it wouldn't. So it'll be up to the applicants to prove that their structure that they're proposing does fit into the neighborhood, and then zoning administrator will be able to review and approve. And I'm also happy to say that this proposal, the first proposal, was approved as of yesterday. They received their accessory dwelling unit zoning permit, and so they'll be able to move forward. That does two things. It brings the parent, I think she's 97 years old, according to the owners, to the property and allows her to live there. And it also frees up another space in the city of Petoskey where she currently lives. So opportunities, we have a lot of this type of development in our county. These are 1 acre lots, all single family detached units. I'll probably have are attached garages. There's probably deed restrictions, so they may have to look at those to see if this is possible, but this would be a prime area where you could infill with 1, 2, 3 accessory dwelling units and allow for increased density. Could utilize the same driveway probably in most cases with maybe an ADU behind or attached to the house. I think there's opportunities throughout our whole county. So our next step would have to be, I think, education of our communities to let them know that this is now an option for them. And we'll see where it goes. But, Traverse City, if you watched ADU 1, they've been doing this for a very long time. They have a much different situation in Emmett County. We're much more rural in a lot of our areas, but there are areas where ADU makes perfect sense. And it's reducing the barriers that zoning can cause. So with that, I thank you for your time. And if there are any questions, I think we're waiting till the end maybe for questions, but I'm not sure.
Looks like, yeah, the one that I see there, Tammy, is our ADUs permitted in the front yard.
They have to meet the setback of the zoning district. So yes, they could be allowed in the front yard.
So thank you very much, Tammy. I love the work that you're doing, and I really appreciate all of your help as a housing ready person in Emmett County. You have been instrumental and amazing. The couple of barriers, the zoning is a barrier that you mentioned too, but using that mobile home manufactured language, is so important because of that build barrier. So that hits 3 is zoning, a financial, because of the smaller homes and the manufacturing, the building process there that sort of streamlines that, and also the build barrier. Like we said up here, we have a shortage of builders. We have a short, we even if we had the money and the ability to, we couldn't get things built quite as quickly as they need to be to meet the needs of our community, like you said. So, you just knocking out all the birds with one stone there, Tammy, and it's important work, and it leads right into our other speaker, Nicole Damer,
yeah.
okay, and she is the founder of Yard Homes out of Minnesota, which has a really exciting concept, and you can speak sort of directly to this whole experience and maybe help us in our evolution of a community that becomes familiar and comfortable with this additional dwelling unit concept, and how much it can feed into and enhance our livability here in Emmett County.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for including me. Yep, my mic is on, just want to check that. And I love hearing stories like Tammy's, where you've got people that are in the position that can make things happen, are actually removing those barriers. And I mean, it warms my heart to hear that happen. So, and I've learned one thing today. So accessory dwelling unit is such a difficult concept for people to get their arms around, right? It's like the legal language that, defines our product. And so I heard you call it additional dwelling unit. So I'm like, I like that. I think people can understand it. It's just an additional unit. And one of my partners that we work with actually sometimes calls it affordable dwelling unit. And I thought, well, that's a good way to describe it too, right? Because it's not saying it has to be used with an existing, property already. So learning all these new terms, and it's like we have kind of an identity crisis in our world because, people kind of look at us and call us tiny homes, and that we are tiny, but we don't meet the legal definition of tiny homes, which is a home on wheels. And so we just are like, all right, we're tiny homes. That's what everybody says. So kind of my challenge. All right, I'm going to share my screen. So I think I can do that now. Here we go. So hopefully you guys are able to see my screen, and then I'm going to pop up a little PowerPoint here that I have. So I want to give you just a little bit of background about yard homes. Let me see. I'm going to move this so I can get to the actual slideshow piece of it. See all my background stuff. Let's do that. Okay, that should work now, right? All right. So just a little bit about yard homes. This is an actual picture from our city in Minneapolis of one of the tent communities that happens to be along the highway. So right behind some of those trees that you see there is a major thoroughfare. And I find it interesting because, the backdrop to this is the city of Minneapolis and all these buildings, which, encompass a lot of wealth. And then, and here is a community tent city, and individuals get to, look at that every day. And it just, to me, it just exhibits just the disparities that we have in wealth in our community, and makes me sad. But it's great because I've actually have some stories that are success stories, from people going from tent living to homes. And that's kind of our goal. One property at a time is basically what we're serving. That's the market we're serving. And when you think about the veteran market that we're focused on, as well as now the youth market, those stories are so unique, and the complications that each of these individuals have, that you have to provide a solution that focuses specifically on their needs. So I'm going to page down a little bit here. Let's see if I can, oops. Oh, next. All right. So the mission and vision of yard homes is really to create more homes for more people in more places, right? And so by more homes, we show all the different units that we carry. Now, when Jamie and I set out to create yard homes, we said we're going to do everything that we do is going to be designed around innovation right from the start. So that meant the product that we choose, how we make it, and how we deliver and finance it, right? And we were going to try to do all three of those things as a one-stop shop, right? So the product that we selected was accessory dwelling units. And we felt that was an innovative product because it didn't really exist in Minnesota. We had a number of cities that had accessory dwelling units, ordinances, sorry. But you could tell that those ordinances weren't effective because nobody was really building ADUs. And if they were extremely expensive, and they were high-end in kind of high-end areas of the city. And we looked at this and said, wow, ADUs are a great way to take advantage of some of the space that we have in our cities, and create more housing, create more density, which at the time was kind of a focus of especially Minneapolis and St. Paul, two of our cities that were looking to find ways that they could house more people. And in most cases, both of those cities were doing what a lot of cities and counties in the country are doing, which was just building up, right? Building more, more multifamily apartments, and going higher and higher. And I'm not opposed to multifamily apartments. I actually led the Multifamily Housing Association for a while. But I have a strong belief that there's a way that we can use our existing housing stock and get families into houses and backyards with green space and playgrounds, as opposed to just, putting children in apartment buildings. So we really targeted ADUs or tiny homes. So these are some pictures of some of the units that we have and some of the projects that we've done. The other thing was, it was for more people. And what I found in the almost 3 years now that Jamie and I have been in this business is that there are so many use cases for ADUs, right? We are, as everyone has kind of spoken to today, it's the aging in place individuals. But we're finding that, youth are enjoying this, single people that are right out of college, can't afford a house, don't want to live in an apartment. We're seeing we've done a number of units where it's a family member housing a disabled child in their backyard. So somebody maybe with autism, where they want to give that individual a little bit of autonomy and space and independence, but they want to make sure they're still close in case, they need the relative. So just the use cases just surprise me every single day. And we're actually working on a book about ADUs. It's just a tabletop book where we're going to put a picture of every ADU that we've done, and then a little story about a family and why they selected the ADU that they did, because I think it will generate some ideas for people around, this could be a use case for us. So more homes for more people. And then obviously more places. So a lot of the work that Jamie and I have been doing here in Minnesota is talking to cities and talking to the councils and talking to city staff, talking to people within those cities and communities, saying, hey, this could benefit your community. This could be good for you. And I don't know, sometimes I believe in fate. And so we started our company in January of 2020, which was in history probably a horrible time to start a company, because we're going into the pandemic. But it actually worked out really well. It gave us an entire year to really focus on planning and focus on like city acceptance of ADUs. But also, one of the benefits of the pandemic was that a lot of people said, I want to get my family members closer, or I'm going to stay home, so I want more space. And so that's been kind of has led to a real spur in our business. But so we look at the ADUs, or the additional dwelling units, as I'm going to call them now, and say, where can we place them, right? We can place them in people's backyards, side yards, front yards. And can we do little cluster developments if we have a vacant piece of land? And that's what we're doing a lot of right now. Cities are really looking at some of these pieces of land that they have that nobody has built on, and saying, how can we put 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 and create maybe a little cottage park for, aging individuals, or a cottage park for, seeing students returning home, or, whatever the purpose is. You can kind of clump people together that are like-minded. And so it's really fun to see some of that happening. So every time you develop a new company, you're trying to solve for a problem, right? And so the problem that we saw, and what we really were trying to solve for, is that there's just not enough homes in Minnesota, right? I mean, and in addition to not enough homes, there are people that are in the wrong size home, right? So that's the family, that's the aging mother and father, who had this nice house in a community. They've raised their children there, and now their children are gone, and their house is just too big, or it's not set up the way they need to, right? The laundry's in the basement, which is 17 stairs below. And so, but they don't want to leave, because that's their neighborhood. They feel safe there. They go to church there. They shop at the grocery stores there. So what's a way that they can actually stay in that community, but be in a home that's safer for them? And in Minnesota, the rising cost of housing is insane. Homes are just too expensive for most people to even attempt to, access. A typical starter home in Minnesota is easily $375,000. I know that might not seem a lot to some on the call that live in more expensive areas, but it is. It is for individuals coming out of college. Even 2 working individuals have a hard time meeting that threshold. The other challenge we have here is just our construction season is really short, right? We get very cold in the winter, and it gets snowy and dangerous. And so we really have a short window of opportunity to produce. So we came up with Yard Homes, right? And Yard Homes was about creating an integrated bundle, right? So bringing the product that and keeping the innovation in mind. So we selected the product as ADUs, and then we decided that it was going to be a prefabricated product, right? We were going to use a modular housing concept, and we felt that was innovative. It wasn't being utilized a lot here in Minnesota, but how could we make as much as possible of that home inside, right? The ADUs are small, so how can we make as many pieces of that ADU inside an environment where it's temperature controlled, where you can work 365 days a year on homes, and that's the prefabricated world. So we essentially now have two different models. We have a full volumetric model where the entire home is made in a factory, basically on an assembly line that's very similar to a car assembly line. And the last step of that assembly line is actually state certification. So the home actually gets inspected and certified, and ship wrapped and sent out the door. And so when it comes to the property, we've prepared the property already for the arrival, and we set it down, attach it to the ground, open it up, and hand over the keys, right? And all appliances and everything are there. The challenge we had with that product was really that even though it fit in a lot of backyards, sometimes it was hard getting it in there. And so we had to kind of pivot a little bit, and we came up with an idea for a second technology, which is called structurally insulated panels, or SIPs. And so that has worked out really well for us. And basically we can do all of our different models, either full volumetric or SIP. And SIP is basically just a kit of parts, right? So it's basically everything is, all the walls, everything is cut to the dimensions that you need. Basically, it comes in a container. So we typically at our showroom have 3 or 4 containers, which are the next houses that we're doing, that contain all the pieces that we need. And that container gets driven out to the property, opened up, and you start assembling the house, much like you would assemble Legos. And so it's a really interesting process, and very efficient. SIPs are, considered OSB, foam and OSB. So they're very structurally sound as well as energy efficient. We're now starting to experiment with different type of materials in between the OSB, something a little bit, hopefully less toxic than the foam. So we've been working a little bit with hempcrete, and we've been working a little bit with what's called beetcrete, which is made out of beet juice. And so getting some positive results from that as well. So always striving to make the homes more energy efficient and more healthy. So the second part of this innovation was the service, right? So when you come to Yard Homes to get an ADU, we do everything from soup to nuts, right? So we take care of all the licensing and permitting process for you. We work with you on picking the model that you want, picking your finishes. We line up and do all of the dirt work beforehand. We do the installation. We do all the cleanup. We get all the inspections done, hook up all the utilities. So it's all done. So you don't have to worry about dealing with multiple vendors. And so it's kind of a complete process. And then the third piece of innovation is really the financing. And so early on, we knew that people were struggling getting ADUs financed in Minnesota. And a lot of it had to do with, it was a new concept here. And our banks didn't really recognize an ADU as any sort of value to the property. And I would say one of the good things that we still have going on in Minnesota is that when you put an ADU on your property, the county doesn't come out and assess you more property taxes. They don't immediately increase the value of your property. And they do that in some of the states on the West Coast now. As soon as you close out your building permit, they come out, inspect add a value of that and then send you a bill for increased property taxes. So that's good here. Now, I always preface that when I'm talking to, my clients that won't last for long. Somebody's going to figure out this at some point, and there's going to be some changes there. But that's also led to banks not being able to finance them because there's, in their world, then there's no perceived value, right? So we worked with a couple of local community banks and said, listen, there is value. I mean, that there's value in another structure on the property. How can we get you comfortable in what that value is so you can somehow lend against that? And so that was taking them to our production facilities and having them see the process, right? That's like, and exposing them to the design itself, letting them see the units, right? Letting them come to our showroom. And we work through that process of how can they determine what that value is and be able to lend on that value for some of our customers. And that's worked out really well. And most recently, if you follow it, Freddie and Fannie have actually come out with some new lending guidelines that allow for you to include the rental income that somebody might get from an ADU as part of the underwriting process. So, the regs around that are changing and everything is moving forward fast. The one program I want to share with you, though, is our Y Help program. And so this is it stands for the Yard Homes Home Expansion Lease Program. And it's really about getting affordable units for low-income residents. Fast forward another page here. It lets me. Next. There we go. A few more. Okay. So it's safe to say in Minnesota that we have an affordable housing crisis. In 2019, I believe it was, or 2020, our governor did a task force, and they determined that Minnesota was about 300,000 units short of housing over the next 10 years. And one of the things that study didn't include, I actually sat on the task force, was the fact that we have NOAA property now that was built in the 50s, 40s, 50s, 60s, that is really good housing and has been able to be sustained. And so it's become naturally occurring affordable housing. If we project forward and we think about what's going to be the NOAA housing 20 or 30 years from now, well, that's the stuff that was built in the early 2000s. And if we look at that housing stock, it does not compare from a construction quality standpoint to the stuff that was made in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. So we're actually going to lose a lot of NOAA housing in the next couple of years. So that 300,000 units short is probably much bigger as if we look out 20 and 30 years from now. So we need to get a handle on this problem now. So the Y Help program, though, is designed to allow for accessory dwelling units to be provided and used for the people at the lowest income brackets, right? So we started this program in 2021 with our partner MACV. MACV is a local veteran supportive housing organization, supportive services organization. And the way the MACV program works is that my business partner and I, Jamie, we actually purchase the ADUs and we provide the maintenance and basically the property management for the ADUs. We find somebody that has low cost or free land. And so in this case, it would be a nonprofit. So in the case that we started with, it was MACV themselves. They owned a couple of properties in the city of Minneapolis and St. Paul, where there was enough space that they could put an additional unit on it. And so we created a lease agreement where we will lease a plot of land from them for 10 years. We will bring in an ADU, and then they will be able to put another veteran into that home. And the agreement we have is that we get to collect all of the rental payments from the voucher, whether it's a Section 8 voucher or whether it's an actual veterans voucher over a 10-year period. At the end of that 10-year period, Jamie and I are paid back for having created and installed that ADU as well as our property management time. And then we deed that ADU over to the homeowner or the property owner. So in this first case that we did, it was MACV. Then of course they will keep that affordable forever, right? We always knew that we wanted to do a phase 2 of this, which is where we would open this up to individuals that just were philanthropic and felt like they had, they wanted to do something good, right? And they, housing a veteran is a very yesable type of deed, right? And so people started to step up once they saw the unit and they saw this happening. We did get a lot of local press. And so our phone started ringing with individuals that said, hey, I'd love to house a vet in my backyard for 10 years. Can we do this? And so we did. And we started doing individual homes. And so it kind of took off from there. We do have, you know, we've had to address what are some of the other issues that can come up, right? For example, what happens if the homeowner wants to sell, right? And so there's an agreement, an amortization table, they can buy out the contract and sell the home. And, you know, so there's outs that if they need to get out, but then we're faced with the issue of, well, what if that does happen? Then we've got a vet that was homeless. We found them a great home and then now they're homeless again. So we wanted to make sure that that didn't happen. So Jamie, my business partner, and I, we purchased 2 properties, one in Minneapolis and one in St. Paul, where we put 6 units on each. And those are what we call transitionary units. So if this does happen, they would go to one of our properties and stay for a short period of time until we found them another home, right? So that's worked out really well. We haven't actually had anybody, you know, exit the program yet, but you know, that could happen in the future. So now those are just transitionary sites. We are actually moving into a second program this year. We're kicking off a youth program. One of the things that's really important about our program is that we have to get the land for free or very little cost to make the numbers and the metrics work. But we also require that there be supportive services attached to the program and that the payment be coming from a voucher. So the margins are very, very thin on our program. And so the fact that we can rely on a consistent government guaranteed voucher program helps make the cash flow work, right? And so a church saw the program that we were doing for veterans, a local church in Minneapolis, and they contacted us and said, we want to do the exact same thing, but we want to focus on youth that are aging out of foster care in Minnesota, but yet are wards of the state still. So these are people between the ages of 18 and 25, where they can't be in a foster home, but yet they're not quite ready to be independent yet, and the state still provides them supplemental housing payments. So we're just about to kick off that program, and the church is offering up land that is actually on their church site, as well as some of their parishioners have stepped up and been able to help with this, provide us location. So one of the pieces that I've left out of this is that in order to make the 10-year commitment work, we need to do some upfront raising of money, right? So when we approached the veterans program in the beginning, we said, we're going to go out and raise some money, right? And so we went and approached 2 foundations and we raised roughly $500,000. And Jamie and I at the time said, well, we could probably build 4 houses with this. But instead we said, we're going to take this to a bank and we're going to put it on deposit. And then we're going to basically leverage that with $1 million loan. So we can create double the houses, right? So that's actually how we've built our model. So we raise money from individuals or philanthropic organizations, and we put it into what's called a PRI investment through an organization called the Venn Foundation here in Minnesota. That money stays on deposit. the PRI money actually it's not a grant. It's actually considered an investment for the nonprofit or the individual. So they actually get a low market return. So they get a 2% return on their money, but they also get the philanthropic return of the stories of the people that we've housed, right? The social return. And so then what we say now, when we started this program in late 2020, early 2021, it was about $25,000 per home, right? So if we raised $25,000, we could leverage that and build one home. Now it's about $40,000, which is sad, but that's just, the cost increases related to lumber, finding individual staffing and the rising cost of that as well. So, but the program still works. There's still a lot of attractiveness to it. And this program is very replicable, right? It's exportable anywhere. It can be exported to anywhere in the state of Minnesota. If somebody wants to do it, it can be exported to any area of the country. I've actually got a screen, I think, where we're working with other organizations so that they can do their own Why Help program. So all you have to have is, a population that is attached to a voucher and somebody that will bring the land. And somebody that can build and oversee the ADUs, and you put the three of them together and it's great collaboration. One of the reasons we require the supportive services is because we want to make sure as the property owners that the individual that is in this home has somebody looking over them. And so there's more than just us coming on site to do inspections. They've got somebody there that will be there with them and also coming out to the site and doing inspections. And so it's worked out really well. In some cases, we don't make it a contract, but we do talk to either the families that are housing people and the tenants that we do want to see some sort of social contract put in place between the two of them. We don't dictate what it is, but it's more than creating housing. It's also about creating community. So in a lot of those spaces, we ask the family members to say, hey, invite the vet into your home, for dinner if you can occasionally. And then we ask the vet if they're able to, they're not completely disabled, to help the family out in some way, whether that be shoveling a sidewalk or mowing a lawn or, watching the kids occasionally or something like that. So we're really, we're interested in creating community with this program as well. So I think the other part of this that I'm really proud of is that we didn't go to the government and say we need more funding or we need a new housing program to make this work. Everything that we're using is an existing program, right? So we're using vouchers that already exist, and there is so many unused vouchers out there. And it's because they don't have the property locations. That's one of the things in Minnesota where the voucher list has not been opened up to new candidates in such a long time because they don't have the places to put them. So why give somebody a housing voucher when there's no place for them to reside? And that's actually an interesting kind of a full circle moment for us in that MACV, our partner on the veteran side, has always considered themselves a supportive services organization, not a housing organization. They do own a number of properties, but typically those were properties that were gifted to them in somebody's estate. And so they had them and they put people in them. As part of their supportive services, they've always helped people find housing elsewhere, find jobs, find food, find whatever medical help, whatever support they needed, but they never really proactively said they wanted to own a number of their own properties because they knew that that the vouchers existed, but there wasn't a place to put people. So this year they felt like with our program and the ability to open up capacity and space in people's backyard and the response that we've had, they actually went to the commissioner, the Veterans Affairs Commissioner in Minnesota and said, we would like to create a VASH program, which is the veterans program at the state level. We would like more vouchers. And so I believe they asked for $5.4 million and they ended up getting about $4.6 million. And Neil, who runs the association, said to me for the first time, he feels like there's an opportunity to actually have more vouchers and place more veterans. So it was really, for me, that was really humbling and a great, like I said, full circle moment to see that our program is actually helping people. So this is kind of just opportunities that we have looked at. So we're working with an Idaho organization to do a YHelp, California, Illinois. I believe there's one other one over here. Our program is not proprietary. It's really about just creating housing. So it's we'll give anybody our playbook. We'll help anybody try to implement it. We just want to see more people housed. That's all I think I have prepared. So I just want to open it up to see if anyone has questions for me.
Thank you so much, Nicole. You touched on just right to the heart of so many of our same and similar challenges, not only from the buildable season, and the climate, climate challenges just from an individual perspective, especially, when you're talking about your insulation and your long-term sustainability and the safety of the people that are in those homes, and that's a huge part of the conversation that, we always want to be creating that inventory and being creative about building and thinking about the buildings themselves. But, that personal people perspective of saying, how can we make this the best home for each of these individuals and safest and most comfortable long-term? That so many cool programs and my brain is going crazy with ideas.
It's one of the best things I think that Jamie and I did was create a showroom where we actually have 2 of our units on display. Because it's really hard for people to understand it until they can see it and touch it, right? And so we've hosted many cities across Minnesota where they've come and we've talked about the program and what they've said, what can we do? And we just said, do you have land? Give us land. We'll bring the units if you give us land. And so we have had, we're in southern Minnesota, we're working on 2 of the units in cities that are going to do some cluster developments where they've stepped up and said, here's some free land. And we've said, great, we'll come in. So it's really good to see that cities are realizing that, they've got to be creative in how they support stuff like this. In other cases, we've had asked counties put, you don't want to gift the money. It's not a grant, put it in the PRI. You're going to get a return on your investment and you're going to get the social story as well. So it's been really good. We are actually working with a city in southern Minnesota that we might possibly create or open up our own panel plant and use it as a workforce development program. That's one of the other keys and mantras that we have is really control our own destiny. And it's been really hard just to keep the production moving when, it's a 8-week delay to get panels, right? And it's 16 weeks to get windows. And so on the panel side of things, that's a very easy assembly process. And if we can, somebody will, the city is looking at giving us a warehouse that we can set up a program and use, kids coming out of the high school or in high school, teaching them how to put together panels. And so it's really exciting the different ways that this can expand and grow and create good all around. So.
Yeah, excellent work. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing your organization, your time with us. I do have a question in the chat. How many ADUs do you need to implement annually to make the integrated bundle approach work?
So the first year we did 12, right? This year, by the end of the season, we'll have 39. And we do, a few of those are actually market rate, because we do have market rate ADUs as well that we sell. But I would say if we can do 12 a year, or between 12 and 20 a year, it works, the math works, right? Once we get to, my long-term goal with this is once we get 100 units in place that are part of the YHelp program, I'll probably take that stream of payments and go to Chicago market and try to securitize that, right? And sell that payment stream off. I think it's a great investment for family foundations that might want, that have to meet community reinvestment requirements, as well as banks that have to meet community reinvestment requirements. So just like they buy mortgage pools of mortgages, they could buy payment stream pools of ADUs. And then what's cool about that is that will basically, cash load me back up again, and then I can just recycle that money over and over again. So that's kind of my goal, is to create that secondary market for these ADUs. But I think if we can do between 12 and 20 a year, the math still works.
Excellent. Excellent. All right. Any other questions from the group? And just sort of want to give them a minute to type if we need to here.
One of the funny things, just speaking about the naming, you know, ADU, what does it mean? Tiny house. We talk about yard homes. And we actually ran into a situation where a developer has started to use our name just synonymously with ADU. So he, you know, like somebody called us and said, hey, they put in this proposal in there. They want to put yard homes in the backyard. And is that your units? I was like, I am not working with that developer. I have no idea. And so it's kind of picking up that yard homes is just kind of like Kleenex, right? And so I'm like, oh, that's amazing.
It is amazing. And I was thinking about that when Alana first sort of introduced you as a speaker, that I thought, gosh, that title, that name is so good, just gets right to the heart of it. And it is, you know, in this environment and trying to change hearts and minds within the community, the terminology that we use is so important. And it can be, like Tammy said, the difference between, you know, just the way a new person presents it, or the language and the vocab that they're using. You know, the difference, like you mentioned, between accessory dwelling unit and additional dwelling unit somehow just ratchets down that visual of thinking, gosh, it's just going to be a shack in the backyard, you know, kind of thing, just an accessory, like a forgotten thing. And then instead of an addition to the not just the community or the property, you know, it's definitely. We have one more question here. How difficult was it to convince communities to open up their zoning ordinances and allow ADUs?
So I wish I could say we were like Tammy and that, you know, the cities were leading. Minnesota is pretty old school. It's been a challenge, but slowly it's happening. Minneapolis and St. Paul have redone their ordinances, and some of it is just like removing owner occupancy provisions that they had in place. And it's interesting because as we looked at St. Paul's ordinance before, they just redrafted it. If you actually laid it out, it was actually predatory. Like they would not, I mean, it was redlining. And once we highlighted that for them, they moved forward quickly to open up the opportunity for ADUs in every neighborhood. But we spend a lot of time walking them through city staff through the process and what it could look like. And I would say that the showroom helps a ton. Once they come to the showroom and they walk into a unit and they're like, wow, this is actually really nice. This feels really spacious. Like I would live here, right? We have a wall in one of our units that we, you know, painted with that marker paint, and we just tell people to leave feedback. And so often that is the feedback we get is like, I would live here. I would love to live here. And that's kind of the effect that we want. So, but yeah, it takes a little prodding. And especially when you're dealing with cities, not everybody is, you know, you've got a council a lot, you know, so 7 to 9 different people sometimes that they're all over the board on, you know, what they support, what they don't support. And then you've got city staff. And so it's quite a long process. And so we work really hard to get all the council people on board. The nice part about it is that the use cases, there's so many use cases that when you do bring like a whole council to the showroom, sometimes they can all relate to one of the use cases, right? It might be, you know, multi-generational living, right? Or it might be they have a sister that has a disabled child and they go, my God, this would be great if, you know, my nephew could live in his mom's backyard. So that really helps bring people along as well. Is talking about those different use cases and tapping into that. But yeah, it's a process, and we're very patient. And there was some legislation put forward this last year at the state level to basically allow ADUs everywhere. It didn't pass, but it was the first entree into it, and you know, we'll go back again next year and kind of keep working on the support and the education. So.
Could I add on to that, Andrea? I think Nicole is right on. Education is key, and bringing the people that are in the situation and showing the boards and the planning commissions that these are real situations that our citizens are facing is so instrumental in moving the bar. I think in our case, we had, a young professional who had been looking for a dwelling for quite some period of time, who was living with his in-laws, and having his story told to the planning commission was key. And then the individuals who were trying to find a new home for their elderly parent, bringing those people to the planning commission and having them tell their story helped basically enact this changed zoning ordinance. I really love Nicole's examples. I'd love to go to Minneapolis and see the
You're welcome. Yeah, come.
now our change to our zoning ordinance at Emmett County could allow these types of units where before Monday it would have been prohibited as an ADU. So I'm really excited to.
And you have to think big about the stories too, right? You're getting the gentleman that wants to live in the community and can't find a home in front of the planning commission to say, listen, you're going to lose me as a resident. Like, I'm a valuable tax-paying resident to you, and you're going to lose me to another city because I can't afford to live here. And this is where I want to live, right? Sends a strong message. The other thing is we've reached out to like neighborhood watch groups to give us data on the reduction in crime by having more eyes on the street, right? So putting an ADU in every backyard in a neighborhood, you just double the number of eyes that are there. You double the protection for that community. So there's so many different ways in which you have to try to tell that story and go after it. But that's a benefit because there's so many different ways that it does good, right? And so just gathering the data, sharing the stories.
Okay, and Nicole, what is for our friends that are watching and listening and learning and having all of their creative ideas sort of bubbles popping up in their head, what is the best way to interface with you and your team, whether it's for information or a potential project?
Yeah, so I'm on every social media platform under Yard Homes MN, and I'm on Twitter as Minnesota Housing Girl. Our website is just www.yardhomesmn.com, and you can from there you can link to me and email. Otherwise, my email is really easy. It's just Nicole, NICHOL with no E, at yardhomesmn.com.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Oh, man. Okay. All right, friends. Is there any further questions or should we just sort of move on? We're coming to the end of our time. Alana, are you still there?
Yes, I'm still here.
Hi. Do we have I wonder if we have the ability to sort of encourage some verbal questions if we don't need any in the chat function. I'm not seeing a whole heck of a lot there because your presentation was very comprehensive, both of you, Tammy. I really appreciate it, and really, helping other communities understand the journey, that starts way, way, way before even the idea for the home, just starts that path forward for the whole community to understand how we're addressing the needs to the best of our abilities and making sure that we're taking care of not just preserving the character of our communities, but also addressing the needs of the people in here. And I love that. And Nicole, thank you so much for your time and your work. And I'm so excited to see some things happen in not only Emmett County, but the wider region here. So to everybody else who's watching, thank you so very much. And
I have a question for Tammy.
Great.
Tammy, I was really hooked on your description of doing an overlay of the zoning to see if it matched revenue. I would love to do that for the city of Manistee, but I can't remember exactly how you worded or described that overlay. I want to talk to our zoning administrator about it.
I think you're talking about the plan unit development residential overlay.
Yes.
Yes, I'd be happy to share that. It's been a tool that we've used 2 different times so far, and we have a third one on our agenda for planning commission. It really allows the developer to be creative, and then the planning commission to review the concept. It doesn't require a lot of upfront investment by the developer. It does require some creativity, and then if the planning commission approves of the concept, then the second step is the detail of working through that. In both cases that we already approved, the developer came in with a much higher density than they ended up with in their final plan. But I'd certainly be willing to share what we have on our books in our zoning ordinance with you.
I would love that. Should I just through chat give you my email address, or what would you like me to do?
Sure, that'd be great.
Okay, thank you so much, Tammy.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for that question and all the other questions that we've had so far. We will have this on the Housing North website, this recording at some point, I believe. Is that true, Alana?
Yes,
And-
it'll be on our YouTube page, and I will also send a follow-up email to everyone containing the link to the YouTube video and the slides from the presentation, probably sometime next week.
Perfect. Okay, so then you can take this back into your communities and share as much as is appropriate or relevant for you guys. Thank you so much, everybody. Really appreciate your time and your information. And hopefully we'll make big changes happen in our area too.